In the courtyard of the training field, screams of quarreling people came out, frightening others. The girl, furiously grabbing the man by the collar, loudly asked if he still wanted to piss her off, although she tried to restrain herself. Raising his hands, the guy smiled and said that he didn't know about her hobby, but she seemed to take it very seriously. The guy said that he would humbly accept it if the captain did this out of a desire to punish him, and the girl bared her teeth. Tearing off her badge, she indignantly asked if this wouldn't be resolved if she left her position. Looking at the badge falling at his feet, the guy asked Captain Bello what she was doing now. The girl told him not to address her like that from now on, because she was no longer a captain, and he had obviously tolerated her for a long time. Now she is his former boss, the former captain told Lieutenant General Ray Oceanus. She angrily shouted at him to take off his badge and fight her. Ray noticed how sweetly she was asking him out on a date, and smiling, said that he accepted Captain Nanny's challenge. At this time, at the southern gate, a little girl ran around, calling the maid and asking her to look, hugging her tightly. Ace asked Mrs. Clara where she was rushing to. The girl answered her that it didn't matter and asked her to look at the paper. The newspaper featured the man's sister had spoken of, Lieutenant General Ray Oceanus. "That's right," Clara answered her. "This is the same crazy dog that her sister said had a disgusting character, even though he had a great face." Ace asked the lady not to express herself like that, and didn't even know whether it was good that she remembered such facts. The girl said that he and his assistants arrested everyone, all of them from that gang of pathetic pirates who began to riot. Ace asked the lady when she learned to read such difficult words. Clara answered that at school, and the servants were immediately happy. The girl happily said that she hoped that her grandmother would come soon, because she told her that she had bought a big gift. But then the rustling of grass was heard, and finally, to everyone's surprise, the youngest mistress of the estate emerged from the bushes. The girl asked for water, and Ace, giving it to her, worriedly asked what she was doing there at this time. The little sister, watching her older sister with concern, asked what about work, had she really been fired? But Nanny, wiping her mouth with her hand, said that she had left on her own, and immediately screams of horror were heard from her sister and the servants. They asked, she was so close to promotion and left her post of her own free will, what the hell was she doing? If the owner finds out about this, then there will be trouble, but then Nanny said that this is not the biggest problem. First, they need to run, otherwise they will all die, which, Clara asked in surprise, why they will all die. And the sister answered lifelessly that otherwise the mad dog would catch them. Ace realized that she was talking about the lieutenant general. Grabbing her sister in her arms, she said that she would explain everything later, asking Ace to quickly bring her money and clothes. Running away with her sister in her arms, Nanny thought that it was because of this crazy dog that she was in this situation, and he had really gone off the rails. Not hearing Clara calling her, she kept thinking whether it would be better to go to the distant villa from here or to the ship to her grandmother. But then Nanny stopped in horror. It was him, only one who rode in the South Ride such a red horse. Getting out of the car and approaching Nanny with a bouquet of flowers, Ray said with a smile that he had come to pick up his bride. She herself asked him to remove the sign and fight her, but he won, and therefore, as had been agreed, he proposed to marry her. All this happened an hour and a half ago. Irritated, Nanny told Ray to take off the badge and fight her. The tension between the two grew as they glared at each other with both evil and soft looks. The knights behind them said that someone had to stop them, but if they got into the thick of it, they themselves could be torn to pieces. But the boy said that Captain Bello was in a dangerous situation and asked if she would be fired in disgrace. But then a higher-ranking officer called out to Private Heinz Mayer, and the guy stood at attention and said he was listening. He asked the private what kind of person he saw Captain Bello as, and he replied that she was a great person. She did not tolerate injustice. She has the courage to be courageous. The captain's strong point is that she has a strong will that will not be shaken by others. Then he himself understands that Nanny is like a mad dog. The foreman answered him, laughing. If there is a simpler way to explain this situation, then for now a crazy dog is fighting with another crazy dog and one is losing. But will this crazy dog just leave? Even if she leaves, she will have to hit at least Rad in order to calm her anger. Ray noticed Nanny's seriousness and asked if things were going this way, he should take it more seriously than he did now. The general asked the lieutenant to go and get him a sword, and the dark-skinned guy asked if he could offer him a wooden one. But then his furious gaze pierced the lieutenant, and Ray asked if he thought a wooden sword would suit him now. Not wanting to contradict, but still fearfully, the guy asked him to forgive him and asked what sword he was talking about. Having heard the short answer, the lieutenant was about to object to the general, but then in horror he said that he would bring it. He wondered if it was normal to lose such a talented friend, but General Lieutenant clearly cared about Nanny. The lieutenant didn't even know what thoughts might be going through the mind of a mad dog Nanny. If she wanted to survive, would be better off stopping there. After a while, the lieutenant general informed the commander that his sword was ready and offered to start the conversation again. Initially placing the sword on the girl's shoulder, Ray's friend came closer and kindly asked Captain Nanny Bello to take this sword. Nanny almost asked the question, but then Ray said that he understood that she wanted to fight, but he didn't think that she hated him so much that she was ready to kill. Therefore, the general hoped that her hatred for him would diminish, but Nanny replied that she did not hate him to that extent. She explained that she never once thought about killing her ally, who was ready to fall with her in battle. And then she said loudly that she just needed to knock that disgusting smile off the lieutenant general's face. The private and lieutenant froze in horror, and Ray asked if she really wanted to leave her mark on him. And although Nanny said differently, the essence was the same, and then Ray said that he could give her this opportunity. He does give her this sword, but in return he asks if the loser would grant the winner's wish. Nanny didn't like it. Her grandmother once told her that under no circumstances should you fall into the abyss of gambling, otherwise you won't get out. But then Ray asked, smiling, if he could wish for something strange. Of course he would make a wish, guided by common sense. There were so many witnesses here. Could she be wrong about him? Ray asked. Everyone was silent, and Nanny understood that she would definitely lose this fight. But she couldn't pass up the opportunity to slap him and voice the taboos on desires, money, and corporal punishment. What kind of corporal punishment is this? Ray asked, smiling. How could he treat his fiancée like that? As a result of a brutal duel, he won, and his wish was for her to accept his proposal of marriage, he reported to Ace. Ray thought it was romantic, and Ace was anxiously asking what this was all about, while Nanny was wondering when the servants had managed to arrive. But then Clara irritably asked her sister what their grandmother had told them when she left them. Shouting and hitting Nanny, she asked how many times she had repeated to stay away from men, alcohol, and gambling. Are they really going to tell her now that she is getting married because she lost a bet? Clara scolded her sister. And his age, where she would go, what she would eat. Nanny, blushing and stuttering, told the little girl that she had no right to criticize her. Then the little girl asked irritably if she wanted her to praise her, and her sister immediately apologized timidly and respectfully. At this point, Ace turned to Mr. Ray and asked if he really intended to marry the younger mistress. Of course it's true. After listening to the question, the general answered, nodding his head, and this tone made the sisters fall silent. The next moment, they both shouted at him to speak more respectfully to Ace, and asked how he dared to be familiar with her. Ray said that after looking at her clothes, he thought that she was an ordinary servant, but Nanny said that it was still impossible, because Ace was a member of their family. Taking the request into consideration, Ray thought about it and said that he would call him sister-in-law, and Ace liked that very much. And Nanny exclaimed in shock and shouted that this was also not allowed and ordered General Lieutenant to call her that. Ray kindly asked why sister-in-law sounded bad, and Nanny asked the general why he was torturing her like that. If she did something well, it was worth praising and vice versa, and Ray immediately confirmed that she was a very good and reliable soldier. After graduating from the military academy, in just 2 years she rose to the rank of captain. He saw all her skills and achievements. Moreover, despite her character, she does not tolerate injustice when she sees it. That's why she looks at her superiors as if they were fish embers, and then Nanny asked what this had to do with him. And then Ray, blushing, admitted that this was why he fell in love with her, knowing full well that he had a bad character. He enjoys insulting others, his hobby is swearing sarcastically, and he joined the army only to mock his superiors. But then Clara thoughtfully asked, if everything was so bad, that's why he lived alone. Aren't such people called bitches' guts? But then Ray said that just by looking at her so dazzling, he realized what a scumbag he was. The little sister said with displeasure that this looked more like a confession than a recognition. Unable to cover Mrs. Ace's mouth, she took Clara with her and asked the boys to talk calmly and without rushing anywhere. Ray noticed that his sister-in-law's speech was rather peculiar, and Nanny asked since when her sister had become his sister-in-law. Looking at Ray Nanny, Krasnaya asked the lieutenant general to be honest and asked if he was sincere. Even though he jokes about it with her, it's still not worth going overboard, and that's all she wanted to tell him. It was clearly sarcasm, because he is not the type of person to play with hearts and do things like that. But that's okay. But if you tell her that this person likes her, she will never believe it. And first of all, she decided to refuse the confession. Frowning, the girl thanked him for looking at her from this side. But she never looked at him like that. But then Ray, putting his hand on Nanny's cheek, asked if it was true. The girl's face flushed. Ray said she frowned when she lied, asking if he could possibly not know about her habits, observing her more closely than anyone else. The Magic Tower exploded. This phrase refers to the Cultural and Industrial Revolution of the Magic Tower 100 years ago. A combination of magic, science, and technology, the person who made the changes was the current head of the Magic Tower from the Adbello family. The combination of science and magic almost caused crop failure, but it was saved by starting with cars powered by horsepower instead of horses themselves, and ending with the introduction of various items, new weapons, right up to military academies. The country took a big step in development and began to dominate. As a result, the kingdom gave the position of duke to the Adbello family. Various families began to cooperate with them to revive the country, as the royal power was strengthened through cooperation with Adbello. After the royal family abolished the private military system, all military power was transferred to the royal family. And after the royal family eliminated a small number of elite royal knights, a new military system was organized. The army concentrated in the north, the navy located in the south. However, the sudden change of military power aroused the envy and jealousy of neighboring countries, and the kingdom was engulfed by the powers. The war that year, which began because of the invasion, ended in a stunning victory for the kingdom, breaking the flag of the empire. It was that same Ad Labor counteroffensive that ended 7 years ago. Clara learned about this at school today. They were told that it would definitely be on the test, but she had memorized everything, so she would pass everything and Ace would be happy too. But then Clara, hearing the nanny's admiration, turned to Nanny and said with disappointment that even the country was able to get out of such a situation. And in fact, Nanny heard everything, and her sister continued saying that you can't build happiness on someone else's grief. Raising her face from the pillow, Nanny indignantly asked if they felt sorry for her, and that both her sister and Ace answered that they did not. The girl lamented about every corner of this damned house, and the fact that it was useless to raise her youngest. The little girl put her hand on her sister's shoulder, and Nani turned around and asked Clara if she was comforting her. But the girl only responded angrily that her grandmother had said that the only thing a criminal should shed was blood. Therefore, she ordered the unemployed woman to take her to school, but asked Nanny to stay, saying that she would take the lady herself. "So that's how it is?" Nanny asked Clara. Would she care if she saw tears in her sister's eyes? She said this while opening the door to the street, but suddenly a bouquet of wonderful flowers appeared in front of her. Clara and Ace happily greeted the Lieutenant General uncle, and Ray kindly suggested that Nanny go to work together. Here the girl stopped the lover and, reminding him that she was leaving, asked how else they could go to work together. Laughing at Nani's absent-mindedness, Ray said that she didn't even resign without writing a statement and asked what she was talking about. Ace was horrified by the news that she had left her post on her own, and Clara said that now she wouldn't be able to brag about it even at school. Nanny asked worriedly and stutteringly how they could be like this, and Ace asked how it could be otherwise. And they told her to stop acting like a child, get up and get ready to leave. The girl's face turned red in embarrassment. And then, running away, she shouted at the end that they should wait for her here. She would quickly get ready and come. Ray was pleased to see her so lively early in the morning, but Ace said he would get tired of it. Then Clara turned to the Lieutenant General, tugging at her cloak, saying that she was interested in something. And when he sat down, she asked why he was making fun of her sister. The guy replied that he was thinking about it. But his sister-in-law speaks quite like an adult, and Clara, puffing out her cheeks, asked if he meant to say that she was an old woman. Ray smiled and replied that it was a compliment. On the contrary, her vocabulary was at a high level, and her ability to express thoughts was excellent. Clara indignantly asked if he was being too impudent to poke her here, even though he saw her a couple of times, and Ray agreed with this. She immediately pointed her finger at the guy and said that if he wasn't dating his sister, then he shouldn't call her his sister-in-law either. This expression made Ray uneasy, and he smiled and wondered if Nanny had been like this when she was younger. Then he asked how he should address her, and Clara proudly said that she should probably introduce herself. Curtsying, she introduced herself as Clara Bello and extended her hand. Taking it, Ray said that he was pleased to meet her. The smart little girl noticed that he was very polite, and the boy replied that he studied hard for this reason. But the same girl asked with interest if he really liked her sister, and Ray answered uncertainly, probably. Then Clara angrily said that her grandmother told her to immediately throw out a man who does not know how to express his feelings. Ray agreed with her grandmother's wisdom and, blushing a little, sheepishly admitted that he liked her very much. Hearing this, the girls squealed with delight, and Clara asked how much he liked her sister. However, it was a secret. Even if Clara said that he had to show himself for her to help him, he was not going to tell. However, she noticed that if he liked her little sister, then he should be kind to her and asked why he always bothered her. Ray said in surprise that he had never done this before, and then Clara said that Nanny walked all over him when she came home from work. While getting drunk, she covered him with bad words, not paying attention to her younger sister, who heard everything. The girl said that if he liked her, then he should be kind to her. Nowadays, people make fun of her, but at that moment, Ray was no longer listening. The only thought that caught his attention was that Nanny had scolded him while the little girl was trying to call the general. Finally, having gathered herself, Nanny left the house and, noticing everyone in a half squat, asked why they were gathered there. Ray replied that they were talking about love, and Nanny screamed and asked why they were talking about this in her house. After a while, they were already driving to work in the Lieutenant General's car, and Nanny was looking at the scenery. Memories of the day when Ray had embarrassingly confessed to her and asked if he was having fun flashed through her mind. Ray asked, looking at the girl, what she was talking about, and Nanny, turning to the guy, explained that she was talking about the fact that he was playing with her. But the guy said that he wasn't playing, but Nanny, on the contrary, thought that all this was some kind of joke from the Lieutenant General. Gripping the steering wheel, he silently drove into the main city and, having parked, called Nanny. Stroking a strand of her hair, Ray said with a smile that it wasn't even that he didn't know the reason why she hated him so much. But leaning back, he asked if he told her that it was all because of circumstances, then she would believe him. Recovering from the shock, Nanny's face frowned and blushed, thinking that she couldn't believe that her heart was beating so wildly because of the person in front of her. But looking at the guy smiling sweetly at her, she thought that he really was annoying her. When they met in the women's night's locker room, the general asked if she had been caught, but Nanny replied that she had come here on her own 2 feet. So she came to work on her own 2 feet because she forgot to resign, she asked with a grin. But fortunately, the rumors did not grow. They played out in such a way that the Lieutenant General did not accept her crime and returned her back. Nanny, scratching her neck with concern, called this nonsense, but then her friend said that she should thank the Lieutenant General. She irritably reminded her how rudely she had treated him and that she had run away. It is clear that the whole mess started because of the Lieutenant General himself, but it was still dangerous. The girl didn't understand because she had been quiet in recent days and usually tried to be careful. She couldn't stand hysterics when it came to serious matters, and Nanny replied that she knew it. Getting wound up again, the girl clenched her fist in rage and screamed at how she could have made such a mistake in front of the team. As a friend, she told Nanny this, but this time she was too excited. The girl turned around irritably and asked if marriage was some kind of child's play for her. The lieutenant did not think that the Lieutenant General did it as a joke, and Nanny reminded him that she had only known him for a month. But is she more? Her friend asked. She knew about that time when she and the general were together, but Nanny said that that didn't happen. Then the friend exclaimed that it was indeed so, and asked if she didn't remember how she caught them. Nanny became even more irritated and said that this numbness was only for a moment, and everything that happened was the fault of this crazy dog. Sighing heavily and staying behind, the friend said that she herself was furious because of him, but at the same time she was clinging to him. And Nanny was really furious, but she didn't understand why, and this made her even more angry. The lieutenant thought about how she could hate someone, and why the Lieutenant General was hindering Nanny's advancement. At the meeting, the general said that in connection with the affairs in the Magic Tower, it was decided to use the new weapon on an experimental basis. He was informed that since the previous report, another block had been added, bringing the total to 6. Nanny, watching everything, thought that the meeting was going on as usual, so maybe she was making it up. You shouldn't have been so sensitive and run away. You should have just pretended like nothing happened. Ray had just managed to announce the end of today's meeting, but then the Lieutenant General was called out. The man quietly informed him in his ear that there was an urgent telegram that they had received this morning. And then Ray, grinning, turned to the gentleman and said that he had heard that the capital's scoundrels, the Royal Knights, were approaching. The lieutenant asked what he meant. The Royal Knights protected the royal family. The army defended the lands of the center and north. The navy defended the center and south. These three became friends through the exchange when they defended the country. Can we say that they are friends? The ultimate goal of the exchange was to find out who was stronger, and the dirty talk led to jealousy over the recent victory of the navy. However, they united with the army for the same reason with the Royal Knights. Things are not so simple. The guy said that Sir Devon was coming with his family for the purpose of exchange, and they say that his immediate subordinates will accompany him. Intrigued by the situation, Ray grinned and looked around at the people and asked if the events were really turning out interestingly. Understanding the hints, all the soldiers realized that they were in trouble, and it would be easier to destroy the pirates. So, without saying a word, the subordinates looked at Captain Nanny Bello with puppy dog eyes. The girl, breaking the pen in her hands in irritation, thought that these damn creatures were trying to sacrifice her. However, she needed to talk to him alone anyway, and for one reason she turned to the Lieutenant General. Nanny's eyes crossed, and she told Ray that she had something to discuss with him, and the guy read her gaze. So, grinning, the general said that they would talk about Sir Devon's visit later, and at that very moment there was no one left in the hall. And while Nanny was irritatedly thinking that maybe it really wasn't worth it, Ray was already behind her. He turned to Nanny and admitted with emotion that his heart skipped a beat when she glared at him. And Nanny, horrified and irritated, said that she got goosebumps every time he said something like that. Then she decided to get to the main point and asked why he was hindering her progress. Ray realized that she was talking about the reason for her departure and, looking away, worriedly said that there were circumstances. Clenching her fist tightly, she shouted and asked if this wasn't the Lieutenant General's personal decision, and since when had this been going on? But what about her? Ray suddenly asked. Why did she risk her life for some promotion? Why does she want to get a promotion so much? Nanny asked, not to evade, because they were talking about something else. But then he asked if it was because of the sword, and the girl shuddered, and the general noticed that she had not taken her eyes off him yesterday. And then he asked with interest if she was really here with him only because of this, but then Nanny shouted that it was not so. Last time she got a promotion purely because of her good work, and asked him what he thought of her. Such a mean way never even occurred to her. On the contrary, she lost promotions several times because of their closeness. This time she was obliged to get a promotion because they said that the sword that would be given in such a case was a real relic of the Empire. She couldn't just let him go. She knew the value of such things and wouldn't treat him casually by asking what he was going to do. But this cynical madman, no way, she only needs to look at his smug grin. He should have put it in a wooden box and locked it in a warehouse, she thought, tearing out her own hair. This guy is capable of opening bottles with a sword if he doesn't have a corkscrew at hand, and he thought he could take it away. But then Ray smiled and said that in that case he would give it to her and asked if she wanted the sword. It was clear from the girl's face that she didn't trust him, and then Ray reminded her that he had told her about this yesterday. She would definitely need the sword. And all because she seemed to have lost it somewhere, and then Nanny realized in horror that her sword was not on her belt. Falling to her knees in despair, the girl said in horror what a fool she was, but Ray said that everything was not so bad. He lifted her from her lap into his arms and happily informed her that there was a way out, although he didn't know why she was so obsessed with swords. And sitting her on the table, moving closer to Ray's face, he declared that if she married him, he would give it to her. Nanny asked the Lieutenant General if he was overheated in the sun, since he had been proposing to marry her for the second day already. Ray replied, smiling, that it was true that he wanted to do it with her. To do what? Nanny asked. The guy explained that they would play a wedding, and Nanny, embarrassed, said that it was a nightmare, and Ray, approaching, asked with whom, if not with her. Kissing her wrist, Ray said that he had thought about it a lot, and in the end, no one but her was capable of leading a person like him, and Nanny saw that he understood everything. She had already suffered more than once because of this damned guy. It concerned work and love. And then, Nanny pulled her hand away from Ray's and angrily reminded him that he himself had said that marriage did not interest him. But despite all this, it seemed that they had some sincere feelings between each other. However, no matter how gentle he was with her, Ray told Nanny that no matter how much she begged, he would never marry. And he didn't even intend to meet anyone, and yet it was as if an impenetrable wall was always separating them. With a heavy burden on her soul, Nanny answered that she knew it, and Ray, smiling, said that it was wonderful. That's why they never spoke out loud about their feelings, Nanny thought, frowning and withdrawing into herself. Placing her hand on Ray's stomach, she pushed him away, rising to her feet and saying that he still irritated her. However, more importantly, she really does need that sword, and Ray, reading between the lines, asked if that meant she agreed. Without answering directly, Nanny extended her hand forward and asked for the sword forward, to which Ray suggested exchanging swords instead of rings. If this sword could kill him, then she would agree. Ray asked with interest if she wanted a red wedding dress. He had red eyes that matched the color of her dress and asked if she would wear it for him. Nanny replied that she would wear it after she stained it with blood. Nanny sighed heavily and said that no matter how much she thought about it, she still couldn't understand it. Her friend said that she was also strange. Nanny pointed at herself in shock and asked why. They are both mad dogs. The only difference is that she has a drop of common sense, while the lieutenant general is completely devoid of it. Angrily, Nanny ordered the lieutenant to hit his head on the ground, and she, while doing so, replied that she was only using her rank to bully him. She wanted to say that if some girl's ex-boyfriend came to her with a proposal of marriage, if she had been sensible, she would have sent him to hell. But then Nanny explained that she had done just that. "What do you mean?" the friend exclaimed irritably. "They were just having a nice conversation, even joking with each other." Nanny asked him not to talk nonsense because she had put Ray in his place, but her friend asked why she hadn't said anything in response, especially when he said he wanted to be buried next to her, but Nanny replied that she would be dead and it would make no difference. And then the lieutenant, calling them two idiots, hugged her car and said that it was much better than that fool. The girl suggested to stop chatting and instead listen to her beauty while starting the engine. The car had 4 seats, but because the back was a bit cramped, she only used the front seats. Nanny was also thinking about buying a car, but her friend asked her not to worry because she would soon receive a car from the lieutenant general. They were going to get married, but Nanny irritably replied that no, but her friend knew that everyone who said that got married earlier than everyone else. While driving, she suddenly asked with interest why he had prevented her promotion, but Nanny replied that she did not know. She thought boredly that she urgently needed the sword that Ray had obtained, that's all. But getting married for this purpose was humiliating, and besides, there was an even more important problem. The little girl wrote to her grandmother asking how she was doing and how much money she was making, telling her what a mess their house was. About how my sister almost quit the Navy to marry the guy she used to date, but she's happy and seemed ready to agree. That her life was hard and she was trying to run the household for her, it was already time for her to go to school, and she told her granny to work hard. Also, the brother had not yet returned home. The sister wanted to throw away his sleeping pills because their expiration date had passed, but Ace talked her out of it. After asking about the letter, the girl also asked if it could be used, hoping that her grandmother would see it and be inspired to work harder. When attaching the stickers, Clara thought she would definitely like the gift, but choosing a sticker turned out to be difficult. And having chosen a hair with a knife, she went down the stairs, grabbing her bag, and asked Ace to put it in the mailbox. Hugging the girl, as asked if she had written this letter to the owner, and Clara confirmed, saying that this would be the fastest way. Then she asked where her sister was and was disappointed to learn that she had already left, saying with resentment that she could have waited for her. The girl said that her sister had an important meeting, and Clara asked if the lieutenant general was pestering her again. As she sat on her bike, as said that there was no need to worry, she thought that he really loved her sister, since he even proposed to her. As they were starting their way to school, the maid asked the young lady what she thought about this proposal, and Clara grinned thoughtfully and replied that she had heard on the radio that you can't tell the bad guys yes right away, let them suffer a little longer. Nanny's friend said irritably that she understood that the royal knights were supposed to come on a friendly visit, and she wasn't against it, but not when it happens the next day. That's complete nonsense. Nanny rolled her eyes and told the girl to calm down while she continued to rage about the changed schedule. On top of that, with this behavior, they seem to be declaring that they are head and shoulders above them. Also, on duty, Ray asked his comrade if all aristocrats were like that. "What kind of question is that?" he asked. "Isn't the Oceanus family an aristocrat?" The man thought that even the mighty Delight couldn't resist them, but Ray laughingly declared that they were real idiots. The lieutenant asked him not to be so rude, and Ray, grinning, asked what their esteemed guests were doing now. The man replied that Lieutenant Fritz should report it, and Ray sarcastically said that he was going to cry. The guy, annoying those present, asked him if he was a lieutenant or what, cursing at the capital's bastards. But deciding to leave the poor lieutenant, Ray decided to get down to business and turning to everyone, asked if everyone was there. Watching the formation, he reported that new equipment had been sent. Those whose names he would name were clearing out their suitcases. The rest were heading to the frigate. He immediately called Captain Bello while her friend mercilessly prayed to God to allow her to go to the frigate. But at that very moment, the merciless Lieutenant General called her name, Ami Chitia, which made her sadly realize that there was no God. The girl whined about how it happened, and Nanny replied that there was nothing to be done, and it was better to look at the situation from the other side. Still, they were trusted with this because of their good skills. It's not that easy to swim next to a submarine, but this didn't save Ami in any way. Having put on the equipment, Nanny noticed that it was noticeably lighter than the previous one when Ray informed her about a message coming from the Magic Tower. He said the new ship was difficult to balance due to its reduced weight compared to other models. And because of this, the submarine may have a harder time entering and staying underwater than before, so please keep that in mind. The submarine will dive on his signal and move at average speed from the moment it joins the frigate. After finishing his report, Ray suddenly called out to Captain Nanny Bello and asked if she knew General Flancy. Something like that, the girl answered uncertainly, asking if he hadn't been a military commander last year. Hearing Ray's answer, he raised an eyebrow and asked if they knew each other. Nanny explained that she had only seen him briefly a couple of times. She asked if there were any problems, but Ray took a long time to answer and said no. And here again there were some riddles. Lowering her head with sadness, Nanny thought, what the hell is on his mind? Ami, who came up from behind, smirked and asked if he had confessed his love, and Nanny irritably ordered her to bang her head on the floor. The girl contacted her friend on the radio and reminded her that work was not the place for personal conversations, and Ami remarked how well she had settled in. At the same time, the command of the special ships contacted Captain Nanny Bello, who confirmed the connection. The man reported that the ship was 3 miles from headquarters, and the location would be transmitted to her shortly. And then, having gathered at the pier, Ray gave the command to go forward, and Nanny jumped into the water. If Nanny was an outstanding talent in the military world, then Ray was a true genius. Immediately after graduating from the Naval Academy, he took part in the counter-offensive on Ad Labor and carried out a brilliant raid in just a week. Having changed the flag on the Palace Tower, for which Ray was promoted to captain of the first rank, the first to advance so far in the history of the Navy. Many people behind his back said that Ray was too young for this, but after he led the fleet, a golden era began in its history. After some time, he received the rank of Lieutenant General and, together with Ed Bello, created a detachment of special ships, which became the strongest. A detachment of special ships, or as they are often called, simply special. They are served by only 13 people, selected elite fighters. Once on the water, Ami asked how people managed without such technologies 100 years ago. She wondered what kind of magic they had, healing, and Nanny was thinking about a levitation spell, as well as balance to withstand the onslaught of the waves. And also different types of protective magic, like a spell to maintain body temperature so that they could stay in the sea for a long time. The young military man, admiring the captain, said that she knew everything in the world, and Ami noted that the youngest was on his first sortie today. And it was so. He was very worried, but Nanny and Ami said not to worry and trust them, because if anything happened, they would help. But then Ami, laughing, told him not to look at their captain, otherwise he risks running into someone. She would have liked to tell the general about them, but then Nanny ordered Lieutenant Chitia to bang his head on the ground. Noticing how cheerfully the girls were, the general ordered them to get ready, informing them that they would soon receive a signal. Immediately, they reported over the earpiece that the ship had set sail, and Ray ordered everyone to sail to a safe distance. Nanny had to concentrate, and, after a moment, she managed to materialize a protective barrier. Ami reported that she was down, Nanny wished them to see each other soon, and the rest of the military also reported that they had entered the water. Offering the Lieutenant General to join, Nanny also went underwater, and Ray announced that now everyone would take their own notes. After completing the mission, Ami irritably asked whether those idiots from Ed Bello had even tested their brilliant inventions or not. It was extremely difficult to maintain balance and not sink to the bottom, and the membrane was crap, water leaked in. In short, the guys from the Magic Tower are real scumbags, Ami said, when suddenly Captain Bello was called to the phone. Ace told Nanny that Clara had a fight with a classmate. The girl had nothing to answer and asked if she had won. But then Ace worriedly explained that the problem was that the boy she had fought with was Lord Delight's son. While arguing with Clara, the beaten boy angrily shouted that she was nasty and that he would really kill her later. Having overheard the conversation, Ray approached her and asked if his bride had any business with Lord Delight. Looking into her eyes, the general kindly offered to give her a ride, explaining that he would do anything for her. When Nanny arrived, she asked if he would go with her and if he had come all this way specifically for this. The guy grinned. And he replied that he was the son of that very Delight, and he had long hoped to meet him in person, and now a convenient opportunity had come his way. As it turned out, he was a real cheeky guy, since he contacted headquarters right before arriving in the South. They walked into the office and, noticing her sister, Clara immediately threw herself into her arms. After Clara noticed that the uncle was also here, Ray confirmed this and asked how she was doing. And the sister carefully asked Clara if she was okay, if she was hurt, and the girl replied that everything was fine, because she used her grandmother's techniques. And really, if you look at it like that, there are no scratches on her at all, only her hair is a little disheveled. The same cannot be said about the boy, who had a nest on his head, blood flowing from his nose and abrasions on his arms. Nanny was stunned to notice that she was definitely her sister, and Clara proudly declared that she was not to be trifled with. After this, a gray-haired man approached them and asked if she was Lady Bello and thanked her for her work in defending the country. He reported that the children had fought on the playground, and fortunately, the miss was not seriously injured, unlike the gentleman. And then the boy shouted angrily that he would break her spine and told her to remember his words about her bleeding. Clara mocked the manners of the capital's children and asked if children really communicated like that. The boy ran out of arguments and insults. Ace asked the guys to stop, but then he asked if he had the right to kill her. Adjusting his glasses, the man explained that he could not kill, but they could achieve the highest possible punishment. Nanny leaned towards Ace and whispered to her who this man was, to which she explained that he was the lawyer the boy had called. Ace worriedly reported that it was not the young lady who started the quarrel. She ignored the gentleman, so he pulled her hair. This no longer looked like a simple childish prank, especially his threats. Then a man approached Miss Clara's guardian and introduced himself as a lawyer and consultant for the Delight family. He said that he was very sorry that this happened. However, the miss had almost no injuries, while the young gentleman was seriously injured. But, Nanny noted, it seemed that this boy had started the fight, not Clara, especially the terrible words he had said to her sister. She angrily explained that children should not talk like that, and in her opinion, it was self-defense. Taking off his glasses, the lawyer asked with a smile, "Why complicate things if the gentleman is the only legal heir of the Delay family? Delight is a very influential family in the capital. Many knights have come from this house who have been guarding the royal family for many years. He is a third-generation member of the Delight family. They are very sensitive to children, and he needs to take this matter seriously." She correctly noted that children should not treat each other like that, and adults should not interfere in it. And he suggested that they talk in private, when suddenly Ray interrupted and said that it was a great idea. The lawyer asked in surprise who he was anyway. Smiling, the general said that it was a bit late to introduce himself, but proudly said that his name was Ray Oceanus. Ace carried Clara away, asking if she was falling asleep, because today had been a busy day, and the girl, yawning, agreed. But then Clara told Ace that she was wondering why this guy was so afraid of the Oceanus family. Thinking about how to say it correctly, as asked if the lady knew which were the most influential families in Adlabra. "Well, Edbello," Clara exclaimed, and Ace explained that the next ones after Edbello were the Oceanus family. The girl explained that this was a very influential military family, in whose family there were many soldiers, people who defended the country. The Oceanus are also involved in the military industry, and Clara, saying that she knows, asked if they make weapons. You could say that Adbello was in charge of production, but first they needed to consult with the Oceanus family and get permission. Then the members of the special ship squad take advantage of this, which meant that Uncle was cooler than that blonde stinker. And realizing this, Clara said that she would call him son-in-law, but Ace warned that he was an outstanding person, although not quite an aristocrat. Ray saw that House Delight lived up to its reputation, and these were not just ordinary people. He was surprised by their courage to contact headquarters just before arriving south, he said, looking away. And as the head of the house entered the room, he said how unexpected and pleasant it was to meet him in such a place. Noticing Lord Delight passing by, Nanny nodded in greeting, but Ray held himself proudly. Coming closer to the Lord, the guy said that as far as he knew, Lord Delight should now be at the fleet headquarters. And while the man was retreating, he asked how it happened that he arrived much later than them, since they also arrived from there immediately. And a legal consultant was taking the rap for him. It was getting interesting, but then Ray stopped and said that he understood everything. He was probably tired from such a rush and asked Nanny if it was true that parents should interfere in their children's fights. The captain replied that she thought so too, but still she didn't want to leave the matter like that. She turned to Sir Delight and reported that his son had made a very ugly statement towards her sister and had even threatened her. And after hearing this, the aristocrat said with disgust that he could not say anything and casually apologized. Nanny explained that she could see that he was not really sorry at all, and explained that then she would not apologize for Clara's behavior either. For this reason, she asked the Lord not to let his son near her anymore and to make sure that he did not bully other students. And she said that if a similar situation happens again, she will go to the director and sort it out, and Lord said that he heard her. There was a tense silence after that as they stared at each other. Nanny would have liked to continue arguing, but she didn't know what the Lord could do with the boy. Ray hoped the boy would be okay, and Nanny asked if he was also afraid that his father would punish him severely. The guy asked if she noticed that children usually don't know such rude expressions. Who else could he have picked them up from? And Ray realized that this was why she didn't continue the argument, and Nanny replied that it was better to stay away from such people. Ray said with a smile that this was true, and the girl was very surprised that they agreed on this. On the one hand, most of the time Ray doesn't give a damn about other people's circumstances, but sometimes he unexpectedly shows concern. The problem was that his care was peculiar, and one could talk about it endlessly. But first she needed to clarify something, and turning to the Lieutenant General, she said that she needed to talk to him. This had been bothering her for a long time, and then Nanny assumed that perhaps Lord Delight really was not at headquarters. It's also strange that the lawyer showed up first, and it also took him a suspiciously long time to get here after the call. Ray agreed. It clearly took longer than they had, and asked what the capital snob had been doing after leaving his workplace. This little devil said that he was terribly curious, and Nanny thought that having a psycho as a partner was not very reliable. The captain was a busy man, and Ray asked how she would have time to sort this out and prepare for the wedding. Nanny thought that this was definitely a phase shift, but then Clara interrupted them and told her sister that she was hungry. The little girl thanked her son-in-law for coming, and Ray was glad that he was already recognized in the family. But then, Nanny turned to her sister and asked Clara if she was really okay, and the little girl replied that she could throw anyone around with that fist. Grandma called her power the fist of conviction and asked them if they knew what a fist of conviction was. The little girl, waving her fist, said that it meant hit before you get hit, and that's what her brother told her. Listening to the sisters' conversation, Ray was suddenly taken aback by what Clara was saying about her brother. Stroking her sister on the head, Nanny agreed, but asked her not to do that again, and she instructed her to hit the less obvious places next time. A stunned Ray thought that she would tell her not to fight at all, but now he was more interested in Brother Nanny, whom he heard about for the first time. But then Ace ran up to them and said that she had spoken to the teachers, and since the boy started first, they wouldn't have any problems. And she happily announced that he, on the contrary, would be suspended from classes for a month and suggested that the lady go home. But Nani still had to stop by headquarters, as if the sudden visit from the royal upstarts wasn't enough. They did indeed have some work to do, but Ray remembered that he had not yet introduced himself, and when he said his name, he said that it was nice to meet him. Ace gasped in surprise and said that she had been so busy running around that she had completely forgotten and thanked Ray for his help, thinking that they were already getting pretty tired of them. But Ray replied that Nanny was his family and asked that if he needed anything, he should contact him at any time. But Ace said that their younger mistress already owed him so much, and she only hoped that something like this would not happen again. And Clara took Ray by the hand and happily told the uncle that she liked him and invited him to come some other time. Nanny praised him for trying to charm Ace, but it was in vain because as long as she rejected him, she would only be on her side. Ray knew she was a difficult target to attack when she asked why she didn't tell him she had a brother. Nanny replied boredly that he had never asked, and Ray wondered if he asked now she would answer. He asked what kind of person he was, and Nanny replied that her brother had recently run away from home after an incident, and Ray asked if they were close. If he had this impression, then Nanny advised him to see a doctor. He was a real psycho. He would give him a head start. Ray asked how old his sister-in-law was, and Nanny thought that when they were together he was not interested in such things at all. He said she never brought it up, and Nanny said she would have told him if he had asked. And in fact, Ray seemed to understand everything anyway, which is why he behaved so stupidly and ultimately did nothing. The only excuses he could come up with to keep her were his victory in the bet and the sword she liked so much. But then Nanny put her hand on his head, pulling him towards her and ruffling his soft, snow-white hair. She asked Ray to face the truth because it was obvious that they still had feelings for each other. So if he really wants to marry her, he should already say that he loves her. Blushing, Ray asked if that was all, and Nanny, looking away, said that he still had to tell why he had prevented her promotion. And to give her the sword, of course, Ray realized that it was not so much, and holding Nanny's hand, smiling, asked if she was ready to wait. The next day, the guy told Ray that the Lord wanted to meet him, and that was 2 hours ago. Ray asked if he could have told him earlier. The knight reported that he tried, but every time he came to report he was not there. Ray only laughed, saying that it was nonsense. Well, now he would have something to do. But then the guy said that Capital Bello asked him to give him something. It was a letter saying to hand it over personally to her son-in-law, in which Clara wrote, saying that she was studying in the 5th grade, and thanking him for his help. She didn't want to remain in debt, so she invited him to dinner, and Ray, touched, asked the lieutenant if his fiancée's younger sister was a real angel. The lieutenant was dumbfounded, trying to figure out if he had misheard, and the general, in turn, said that he needed to buy her a gift. Such matters, he said, did not require delay, and the guy watching him only sighed heavily. While shooting, Nanny said that he couldn't say anything and just ran away. Next time, she decided definitely not to leave him alone. And finishing the rotation, I asked Ami what she thought about the Royal Knights. Rubbing her pistol, the girl replied that nothing surprised her anymore. These knights were obviously close to the king, and since they showed up here so rudely, there must have been some hidden motive somewhere. She shouted irritably that she couldn't understand what the South had done to upset them every time some kind of crap happened to them. 7 years ago, this Delight got drunk and almost burned down the ship. But then Nanny remembered her conversation with Ray and said that perhaps Flancy was involved in this. What is she talking about? Ami asked, stunned, saying that he was a holy man, their savior, and it was thanks to him that the food here had become better. And then she started talking about her promotion, saying that if it worked out, she would be appointed an intelligence officer. Nanny was surprised, and Amy said that it hadn't been officially announced yet, but the rear headquarters had decided to introduce a course for mid-level naval personnel. Nanny hadn't heard anything about it, and Amy explained that nothing had been decided yet. But if you think about it, no one from their staff got promoted, which means the general rejected not only her, but all the candidates in their staff. And while thinking about this, Nanny turned to Ami and asked if she could find out about this. At this time, Ray met with the Lord, offering to let Delight see how well he could do, until the friendly relations between the fleet and the knightly order of the kingdom end. Clara greeted the general's uncle, and Nanny asked what she had in mind and told him not to call him uncle. Whatever her reputation, Clara, bowing to Uncle Lieutenant General, greeted him at her dinner today. Ray asked how the lady could be so smart and thanked Miss Bello for the invitation. He handed the child a gift, and Ace, who had come up, greeted the younger mistress and the lieutenant general who had arrived. Handing over the bottle, Ray said it was nothing grand, but asked to accept it. Ace replied that he didn't have to bother. But then she realized how expensive alcohol was, and that she would have to go hungry for 3 months to buy it. Running away in a hurry, she said that she would now prepare dinner, and Clara thanked the uncle for helping at school. Ray praised Mrs. Politeness and asked if that guy bothered her more, and Clara replied that he sat silently. However, Clara noticed that he had bruises on his arms and legs, thinking that he had fallen down the stairs, since there were none after the fight. Nanny and Ray looked at each other silently, knowing full well that their theory was correct. Soon they moved to the table, and Ray said that everything was very tasty, and he especially couldn't tear himself away from the seafood stew. Stuffing her cheeks, the little girl said that everything Ace did was delicious, and Nanny asked Clara not to talk with her mouth full. However, Ray was only happy to see how well she ate, and Clara thanked her uncle. This gave Nanny a strange feeling, although it was nice to have such warm relationships in the family. After opening the box, Clara thanked her for the gift, and Ray was glad that she liked it, and her sister asked if she asked for the gift again. and she asked who she looked like. Being such a snob, Clara asked her to stop, saying that she was no longer the same miss as in the past. Before, adults would just give her snacks and pocket money, but now they don't give her that just because she goes to school. Ray was shaking, holding back his laughter, and Clara asked what was wrong with Uncle, to which Nanny replied that perhaps he wanted to go to the restroom. Here, Ace said that if they were finished with dessert, she would clean up, and the little girl praised the taste of the pudding. Ray offered to help, but Nanny said that he had never seen a guest clean up and told him to sit with Clara instead. Ray agreed to play with her, and the girl said that she would give him her best toy, which Ray immediately recognized as the sticker from the invitation. The girl happily confirmed this, and then the guy asked with interest why he was holding the knife. Clara asked not to worry, saying that they were punishing the bad guys who violated the law on sanitary standards for animal products. And this new girl who came to them today will become a real assistant, and so a special suppression group was formed. While combing the doll, Clara asked her uncle if he was really going to marry his sister, and Ray whispered that he really wanted to marry her. The courage of this young man amazed Clara. However, she had no intention of helping him. She explained that they say that such love problems do not end well if a third party gets involved. In the evening, Ray was already getting ready to leave, and when she saw him off, Ace said that he needed to drink some more tea. Nanny didn't understand how she could switch to his side just because of alcohol, but Nay replied that he had to go to work the next morning. In farewell, Clara called her uncle to play next time, and moving away from the house, he told the bride, "But the night air is cool." Nanny reminded him that he had to go to work tomorrow and drove him there, and Ray, noticing that she was still wandering around outside, asked if she wanted to walk him home. Thinking how carefree he was, Nanny placed her fingers on his lips and, frowning, asked if he remembered her conditions. General Ray didn't answer. A smile appeared on his face again, and he squeezed her hand in his. At first, Nanny thought he was playing with her, but then why couldn't he say that he loved her? She feels sad to feel this invisible wall between them, even though she promised to come to him. She had told herself not to be the first to admit her feelings anyway, so what was he, a silent coward, afraid of? The morning began with Ami screaming, saying that she was trying to have breakfast in the dining room, and some guy started a fight, and the captain did too. Nanny reminded the lieutenant that she was also a captain, and Ami shouted that the only important thing was that she remembered all the faces and names. And she screamed that she would tell everything to Lieutenant General, and Nanny realized that she was not going to turn a blind eye to this. She then relayed information from General Flancy, who asked to look into it, and it had information restrictions. Nanny asked if even her skills weren't enough, and Ami replied that it was a little different. She valued her high opinion very much, but while eating a sandwich, she asked who could stop the prison warden's information. The only person who could eliminate information at the admiral level was a top-level admiral. The highest rank in the Navy's command hierarchy is Chief of Staff, but the current position is vacant. And the one who can do this is one person. Ami would not like to doubt General Flancy. But they didn't want to put the Lieutenant General under suspicion either, but then Nanny noticed the number on the back. And then Lieutenant Ami explained that this was a recording of the arrival and departure of Major General from the rear headquarters. That day when Nanny met Sir Delight at school, did she see General Flancy, and Delight himself was late. And now she remembered Ray's question about what the capital's scoundrel had been trying to achieve by leaving work. And at that moment, Nanny clutched the piece of paper and, calling them bastards, said that she didn't know what this thing was, but she would kill them all. As expected, the day he went to Mare School, they confirmed that General Flancy and Sir Delight were in contact. "So," Ray asked, "this is the same bar since he settled down to come here?" The man who was reporting asked if they didn't say that some people get courage in exchange for brains. The Lieutenant General laughed and said that he shouldn't have been drinking there, but in any case, he was on the hook. Ray remembered the general saying he was uncomfortable and asking for it to be resolved before he returned. The man, in gratitude, said that he would buy him something tasty, and Ray asked if that was all he could offer. And then he answered that if he teased him, then the responsibility would fall on him, although this was unlikely to happen until he deprived him. Noticing the general's condition, the colonel asked what was wrong, and Ray replied with concern that he had simply remembered something. And then, thinking, he asked what he thought about leaving him alone until the old woman came. The man replied that perhaps they would both live long lives on cement ships, and Ray thought that would be the case. Besides, the lieutenant's wife was like a beast, and his children looked like little animals. Ray asked if he could cope without the lieutenant colonel, and he replied that it would be hard, unfair, but he couldn't die right there. But he asked the general if the king was aware of this, and Ray confirmed by saying that the old woman had probably reported it before leaving. However, the man thought that they would ask him more harshly when the king found out, and Ray said that he was definitely out of his mind. The colonel noticed that the guy spoke just like a lieutenant general, and Ray explained that he was as crazy as he was. And suddenly, he asked if today was the day for joint training with the knights, and the man confirmed that he would soon go to the training ground. Upon arrival, the imperial military discussed whether the locals always travel in horse-drawn carriages, and that even in the capital, horse-drawn transport has not become widespread, and today's breakfast was also stressful. There were croissants that smelled of butter, delicious salads, and they could even choose a sauce. The guy was stunned and shouted that it was a buffet, no doubt, and the other guy was wondering if the Navy guys ate like that every day. The girl asked if this was not done for show, but she was told that it was impossible. It didn't make sense, since they arrived the day after they announced their visit. But no matter how you look at it, they were much better than them. They were indignant, but then the guy ordered them to come to their senses and asked if they had come here to have fun. But then the colonel ran up to the knights, saying that he had been waiting for them, and holding out his hand, introduced himself as Dan Ice from the Special Command. After examining the patch, he introduced himself as Guibert Ferrat, a member of the Royal Knightly Order, and thanked him for today's training. He shook the colonel's hand, to which the colonel replied that it was a great honor for them to train with the venerable royal knights. But then Nanny came up, and the knights immediately began whispering about the beauty of a beautiful woman in such a wilderness. Having looked over the composition, Gilbert asked the lieutenant colonel if this entire crew was only a part of the special ones, and Ice confirmed this. He asked if they didn't have their famous personal ships and if they could try them out. Dan said with a smile that he himself understands that having a personal ship is not an easy matter, and they only work with them in emergency situations. The knights from the kingdom asked with a smile what was so grand about it. Ordinary armor was no different. They mockingly asked if they could guarantee their safety here with the women, and the girls tensed up. Most of the Navy was angry with them, and with hints of self-defense they threatened to beat them or, on request, kill them. But then Nanny stopped these disagreements and suggested that they try this first. Gilbert asked what she meant. This was important basic training they must undergo before operating personal vehicles. The method directly suggested by the Adbello family was adopted and called a good idea by Gilbert. And Ice warned that trainees often have trouble adjusting weight and power. But for the Royal Knights, it will not be difficult, and the boys were inspired, thinking that walking on water sounds fun and like an attraction. When everything was decided, Dan ordered to contact the armory and prepare defensive weapons. He said that the training method is simple. After they put on protective equipment, a return point is indicated to the buoy and they need to swim to it. He hoped, as he removed the protection, that seeing how the protective equipment was put on would make them understand everything. And then, dropping it with a crash onto the sand, frightening the Royal Knights, he reported that it weighed 40 kilograms. The defensive equipment is the masterpiece of the Adbello family, a rare equipment created by mobilizing all the magic and technology in the kingdom. You can run on the sea and dive, even sink a large ship with bullets installed inside. However, it is not finished, and when Ray first put it on, no joke, he felt like he was carrying a house on his back. And if he hadn't met the general, he would have become food for the fish, but after the training was over, the knights lay exhausted, washed up on the shore. The lady was happy that they were still alive, and at that time the girls were talking about going to dinner at Nanny's house, but she found an excuse. Gilbert, writhing with fatigue, wondered what it was. They say they put it on without any problems and use it. He tried to find information about the ship, but if this is the case, then he has no choice but to use another move. At the bar, Sir Delight was greeted in the south, saying that he had done well today, and the other knights asked for a bottle. Talking to Ray, the bartender was indignant at this bastard, because of whom he opened this place in broad daylight on a holiday. Ray grinned and replied that it was nice to earn money and asked to be given the opportunity to spend it by signing a check. While reading it, the guy asked if he would spend the money and put the bill in the name of the Navy, and Ray asked if he should put his name in. The guy replied that this was the only way he could rob him, to which Ray replied that he was a simple, honest soldier. However, the barman replied that a man who brings his subordinates and drinks in broad daylight is not at all honest. But suddenly he asked why the eyes of the military chaplain were here, as here, the man, pouring everything in one go, said that God tells them to drink. The knights laughed and said that he was the best priest, and could not believe that they had managed to witness God's grace. The bartender asked Ray if it was the same in other units, worried about the peace of this country, but Ray laughingly replied that he didn't know. Then he asked what was there regarding his request, and the guy replied that he had prepared everything. He handed Ray the package, and the general said that he knew he was the best candidate to ask for help in this matter. Paul asked if he wasn't always the best, and Ray, looking at the Lord's company, replied that only at work, otherwise he didn't know. The bartender asked if he was seeing that girl again, and Ray reminded him that he had asked him not to pay attention to his personal affairs. How sadly, smiling, Paul said, because she was very close to him and Ray himself knew it. If you know, Paul said, and advised this crazy person to let her go, but Ray admitted that she fell in love with him like that. The friends noticed that Clara had been looking out the window for some time and asked what had happened, and the girl replied that she felt like some pervert was targeting her sister. When asked how she understood this, the girl replied that her female intuition told her, to which her friend said that there was no arguing with this intuition. But they asked if Nanny's sister had a new boyfriend, and Clara replied that she had one that she liked. The friends were delighted, but Clara said there was one problem: his nickname was Crazy Dog. It seemed cruel, but Clara said that he really was handsome, to which her friend replied that the face was not the main thing. She cited her aunt as an example, who for the 4th time only looked at the face. It was worthy of praise and resembled a movie. However, one of the class informers raised his hand and informed the teacher that the girls were talking again. The teacher reminded the children that they were reading a book and asked them not to talk, to which Lord's son called them fools. The teacher gasped at Delight's behavior, and Clara began to rub her eyes and whine, making a scene. "What should I do?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. It seemed he liked her. Delight, horrified, asked what this meant. The boy shouted and asked why he was doing this, and her friend began to console Clara, seeing how offended she was. And the little girl herself said that the worst thing is to make a woman cry. That's what her sister and Ace told her. She said that immature boys during puberty pester the girls they like. Clara's friend discontentedly told the fool to just say so if he liked her, but the boy again shouted that this was not so. He claimed that commoners like her would be scolded by his father, but then one boy said that he was a nobleman. And what? Delight started up again as soon as his father finished his work, but he didn't have time to finish speaking. A single but rude boy interrupted him and explained to him that the Navy would protect the South. After that, Clara told her sister about what happened, and Nanny became interested in this boy with glasses, Seren. The little girl said that he was her close friend, but then Ami said that between a man and a woman, there is only love and hate. Clara became interested and asked what love and hate were, but then Nanny asked her if she had done her homework. Washing the dishes, Nanny reminded me that she asked her not to teach Clara such things, but Ami thought that young people today were scary. And then she asked how things were going with the Lieutenant General, and Nanny replied that she had accepted the marriage proposal. Ami was surprised that she accepted, but Nanny said that he refused her, and Ami asked how they could get married after such a quarrel. Nanny said that she was sure that he liked her. Her friend looked at her worriedly. He himself spoke about this stupid desire to confess and tell why her promotion did not happen. A man who couldn't do these things, but still, she definitely liked this idiot. In the dining room, the naval soldiers were surprised by the terrifying sight of the Royal Knights, who looked like zombies. They looked lifeless, but then the guys were told that they were undergoing special training, but it was unclear why they were doing this. Everyone knew that special training was hell, and just because they were special didn't mean they would get special treatment. It seemed they wanted a private ship, and the girl said that at first everyone admired it because of its reputation. But after completing his training, he was eager to desert and voluntarily signed up for it. The Royal Knights did not know where the food they ate was going, and told Sir Gilbert that they would indeed die at this rate. Hellish training, repeated day after day, and if there is hell, it is not difficult to guess that it consists of water, said the knight. Remembering the colonel's words, the guy said that this devil was deliberately and specially exhausting them like this. The girl reminded that those guys had also undergone similar training, and then Gilbert suggested that they move to another place. And now, finding himself alone with his comrades, he shouted that he could no longer see the guys from the Navy. This was their territory, and naturally, wild animals on land would not be able to find their way to the sea. The girl confirmed that they had won, but then Gilbert shouted that they would do it in 2 days. He explained that Sir Delight had told him that a ship would arrive at midnight on the 3rd day, and the boy asked if it was straight from the kingdom. And taking out the map, the chief said that General Flancy would arrive and explained that this was the key to the arsenal, which the guard had delivered through Sir Delight. Gilbert said that the ship would be sent at night. All that was left was to steal it, and that would be the end of it. But then he noticed that such an adventure worried his comrades and asked if this was a problem, to which he asked if it was possible. After all, this is the headquarters of the Navy, the place with the highest level of technology in the kingdom. And Gilbert said he understood why he was worried, but it was not an easy matter. He wouldn't dare say it, but what they were about to do now was tantamount to betrayal. However, he immediately contradicted himself by asking his comrades whether they were not participating because they also needed money. The comrades were horrified when Gilbert said they could do it, telling them not to be heartless. He told them not to worry, saying that they would never be caught, and suggested that they go so that no one would suspect them if they disappeared for a long time. When the knights finally left, Ray, who was watching them, said with a smirk that the carrot and stick was rather banal. On the new day, Ice asked if they wanted to see the private ship arriving today, and Gilbert was horrified. Dan said that they had been training so hard all this time, so he didn't think it would be a problem for them. Of course, permission from Lieutenant General was needed, but hearing this, Gilbert became inspired and said that they would wait. Thinking that heaven was on their side, the boy shook the colonel's hand and said that it was an honor for them. "Honor, he will say," answered Dan, and said that despite everything, it is quite difficult to service such a weapon. Gilbert asked not to say such things, and asked if he was not the main character who managed to achieve success in the counteroffensive 7 years ago. Ice explained that the real hero was the Lieutenant General, because at that time he was a cadet who had just graduated from the Institute. And then the knight, fawning, happily said that he was well aware of the Lieutenant General's achievements. Learning of all the plans to bring the Royal Knights to the ship, Nanny said that she would kill them, scaring the private. She asked him about Amy, and he replied that Captain Chitia had gone outside, and the general was preparing to meet the target. There was no order to convene, so did everyone except her come out, Nanny asked, and the guy asked not to tell. Ray Oceanus, what the hell is he planning? All this nonsense. She knew she needed to take off the badges and fight him again. Walking Gilbert to the dilapidated house in the woods, Ray asked if it was really nice here, and Gilbert asked if everything would be okay. A personal ship is a national treasure, and the location is under the strictest supervision. Security must be at the highest level. Ray replied that it usually is, which is why they use this place, so that no one would think that this place is an armory. Besides, only a few people upstairs, including him, had security cards, Ray said, holding it up to the door. Gilbert was struck by a magical shield of such magnitude that it dissipated above their heads as the house changed and opened up. Ray felt like they had much better security than he thought, and opened the door and invited them in. In the morning, Ray was informed that Sir Delight, Knight Farrat, General Flancy, confirmed that they were all involved in this matter. Ray replied that the Delight family was quite aristocratic, and there was no point in a child from a prestigious noble family going to school. With the Delight family's finances on the verge of bankruptcy, the so-called family lawyer he met was actually an immigration broker. Not having money for a tutor, he even resorted to gambling. To say that he is pathetic is to say nothing. But then, Captain Nanny entered the conference room and addressed the Lieutenant General, to which he asked when she had arrived. Without answering the question, the girl asked if he was free tomorrow evening, and Ray asked in surprise if she was inviting him on a date. The girl answered positively and asked if he was not busy, then could they go on a date tomorrow? To the surprise of those present, Nanny offered him to eat in a beautiful place and then spend the night in a hotel. She said she would prepare the lingerie that he liked and asked if maybe he wanted to try something different. Worriedly, Ray stopped his bride and asked what he had asked her to say to the captain today, if there was anything to say. He asked her not to be shy, and then Nanny, irritated, asked again who should be shy here, to which Ray laughed nervously. Tomorrow evening was the day of the trader's operation, and he made sure that it did not reach Nanny's ears. And then Ray said he was very sorry, saying he would be late on duty tomorrow, to which Nanny told him to forget it. And then Amy asked her friend if she had finally opened her eyes and decided to act. In response, Nanny heartlessly ordered Lieutenant Chitty to assume a prone position, and while following the order, her friend said that she was simply supporting her. And then Ray asked the colonel if the kingdom would fall if one personal ship disappeared, to which Ice told him not to even dream about it. Already at night, Gilbert arrived on the shore for reinforcements and reported that there was no tail, But then Delight asked where his subordinates were. The guy suggested that Sir Farhat stop now, but Gilbert asked what nonsense he was talking about, having come here, whether he came here to be afraid. It was already too late to regret, but the guy replied that even if they confessed now, he would remain the main culprit. To which Sir Farhat shouted at his subordinate and ordered him to stop talking nonsense, saying that it was treason. Shouting that it was either a promotion or the guillotine, Gilbert angrily walked out of the house, leaving his comrades behind. Delight asked if these traitors were not in league with him, how stupid it was that they wanted to rat on him. They boarded the boat and Farhat asked Sir Delight how his wife and son were. The man grinned, realizing that he was interested. And he asked where he was going, having given him wealth and honor in the capital, whether it was time to take responsibility for his actions. After this, the man reported that they were approaching, and it seemed that there was no one, and then a ship of the kingdom appeared in front of them. Having boarded the ship, the man suggested to begin, but first said that they needed to check this ship. Farhat looked back at Sir Delight, who shook his head from side to side and said that they were tracking him to his destination. The one who brought them said that they had nothing to worry about and asked if they shouldn't all get along with the kingdom. The guys went to check the ship when suddenly the man saw something moving in the water, but did not understand what it was. But the very next moment he was struck by a sword and the men looked around in horror and shouted that it was an assault. Nanny found herself right in front of Sir Delight and his accomplice when people from behind shouted that they were people from the kingdom. But then the man noticed that something was wrong, and it was definitely a woman from the Navy. But he did not see that there were reinforcements with her, and it seemed that she came alone. At that moment, Nanny had already risen. The guy playing the role of the team's defense said that it was even better this way, and offered to quickly deal with her. Another turned to the beauty and told her not to do something stupid and give him her sword, and then he would try to be gentle with her. At that moment, Nanny handed him the sword without asking questions, and the man said doubtfully that it was good that she was so obedient. But at that very moment, Nanny put a gun to his forehead and asked what she should do. Her mood was simply disgusting right now. She said that she really wanted to see him suffer, but then she pulled the trigger of the gun. When their second comrade died, the guys rushed at Nanny, shouting to grab that bitch. When the guy swung at her, the girl crouched down and grabbed a sword from the floor and punched the guy in the face. Following the one who was sent out, another young man rushed at the girl, swinging a huge cleaver. However, when the boy struck, his cleaver hit the ship and the girl jumped on him from behind. Farhat asked Sir Delight in fear what they should do, and the man replied that they had no choice but to kill her. If not this, they themselves might die, but then Gilbert's gaze fell on the pistol that had fallen from the man's hands. And grabbing it, he thought that she would not be able to stop him, and pointing the gun towards Nanny's back, he fired. But suddenly, the bullet flew away from Nanny, and the girl turned around and asked why they were so surprised. Didn't they expect that a Navy member piloting a ship would be able to create such a powerful magical barrier? And soon, after the numbness, Nanny dealt with them too, leaving not a single living spot on their faces. Having delivered the traitors to the port, she told Rhea about 2 rebels who had captured a personal ship and 1 smuggler. They also found the stolen personal ship. Ray also knew that they had more minions. And he asked what had happened to the rest of the Imperial soldiers, to which Nanny replied that there had been an accident. The captain lieutenant folded his arms across his chest and asked Captain Bello what this was all about and when she began to act independently. But then the punished Ami turned to the lieutenant general and reported that the captain knew everything from the very beginning. She explained that the captain couldn't stand it when people treated her like that and acted behind her back. Ray replied that even though they knew about it too, they still helped the captain get into the armory. All of Ray's plans went to waste. They were supposed to split the sinister order through the chief of staff and isolate only Delight and Farai. He pretended to have accidentally dropped the keys to the armory during the party, and they were supposed to fall into Farad's hands. After fulfilling his role, General Flancy was arrested, leaving only the traitors and Imperials to be captured at the border crossing. But then Nanny turned to the Lieutenant General and asked if that was all he could say, even though she had helped them so much. When Ray did not answer her, the girl angrily asked if she was so funny to him and screamed that he had deceived her, hidden everything and rejected her. Nanny screamed and asked if that meant that her conditions meant nothing to him, but Ami interrupted her with a scream. She said that there were too many people here and suggested that they return to headquarters and discuss everything there. Then Nanny turned away from Ray in resentment, and the guy realized that this time everything would really end badly. A military police report said evidence of illegal lending was found at General Flancy's mansion. The finances are currently being monitored. The general, covering his face with his elbow, listened to him lying on the sofa. The colonel reported that, thanks to the data that Captain Bello had obtained from the smuggling vessel, information had been collected on the transactions. But seeing the state of his comrade, Dan turned to the lieutenant general and, afraid of appearing rude, asked if he could ask something. In response to this, Ray opened his tired eyes with dark circles under them and asked Ice if he thought he got what he deserved. Dan asked if he had cried, and Ray stood up and replied that he had cried all night, sighing, and asked what he wanted to say. Ice told the lieutenant general that the captain was not so weak that she could rely on his protection alone. She is a person with a strong sense of self-worth and also has outstanding abilities and an honest character. However, it seemed to the colonel that the lieutenant general was dissatisfied with the captain's actions. And Ray, sighing heavily, said that it seemed he was still too naive, and the colonel replied that he thought the same. Ray said guiltily that the captain herself was a very wild and free woman, to which Dan sighed. He asked Ray if he ever thought that his relationship with her could hurt her, and the guy replied that he understood this. Colonel Ice said that he only knew what he heard from Lieutenant Chitia and did not go into details. But it seemed natural that the captain would behave like this, and Ray asked guiltily, wondering how he was seen in everyday life. But didn't it seem contradictory to him to inflict pain, justifying it with the desire to protect a loved one? After this statement, a smirk appeared on Ray's face, and he agreed with Dan that he was a complete contradiction. A few hours earlier, Ray had asked Bello where she had learned to behave so brazenly and why she had acted without orders from her superiors. Ray never thought he'd live to see the day when he'd have to remind an active duty soldier of a simple truth, that using a weapon without permission could result in a military court, and Nanny simply apologized. She was ready to take the appropriate punishment, but then Ray looked at her hand covered in dried blood and asked if she was hurt. In response, the girl sharply pulled her hand back and said with displeasure that he had no reason to worry because it was the blood of an enemy. Ray wanted to say something else, but then Nanny interrupted him, saying that in the future he would be more careful so that something like this would not happen again. When they arrived at the scene, Ray told Nanny that he knew she was angry with him, but he wouldn't even think of apologizing. The girl turned around in shock and asked why, to which the general explained that he wanted to sort everything out quietly. Since this was a mission to carry out internal traitors, he was extremely careful, he reported sadly. If the information leaked, it would give the enemy an opportunity to exploit their weak point, and if you think about it, everything was connected. But she wanted to hear it from his lips and clenched her fist and asked Ray Oceanus why he hadn't included her in his plan. It seemed like the question might be complicated. Maybe she should keep it simple, like, when is he going to tell her that he loves her? This pressure somewhat puzzled Ray, and he, dumbfounded, silently looked away. Nanny considered this and understood that silence was his answer, but Ray tried to grab her hand and justify himself. But Nanny did not let him do this, and shouted that if everything was not so, then let him please tell her at least something. She asked very loudly, with pain in her chest, if he was happy with her, if he was glad about it, and if he regretted it, but why he had so suddenly distanced himself from her. If you remember, it was always like this. He showed warmth to her, as if he couldn't do without her, she said in a calm tone. But in fact, he did not express sincere emotions. He kindled in her a useless attachment and stirred up feelings. She screamed again in despair that it would be better if he just took advantage of her and left her, and then she would too. But she was the only one left looking like a fool, she said quietly, drooping her shoulders. He defeated her in love, and she became his victim. Nanny said that he pretended to lose a stupid bet and agreed to her proposal. Ray's heart sank. He wanted to justify his behavior to Nanny, but she, not wanting to listen to him, said that it was time for her to return to headquarters. And rudely, coldly, and dryly, she called the guy Lieutenant General, which caused Rhea to feel alarm and fear. Then he reached for her, saying that he would take her, but Nanny coldly explained that it was all over, and there was nothing more between them. Lying in bed, Nanny worriedly thought that you have to look hard to find an idiot like her, because of what she did in a fit of anger. Now she is sick. Could there be anything more humiliating, she thought, when Clara came into her room and asked if she was okay. She asked if she was feeling unwell, and that was why she didn't go to work, and touched her forehead, and realized that she was burning up. "What is it?" Nanny asked Clara. "Is she afraid that she won't be able to earn money?" Clara seemed to confirm this, but quickly turned it into a joke as Ace approached, telling the girl that it was time for her to go to school. Clara answered excitedly that she couldn't and that she needed to bring her sister to her senses, but she was dying, she said, shaking Nanny. However, Ace sternly told her to finish because she might be late for school, and Clara gave in, telling her sister that she would be back soon. Taking the baby away, Az asked the owner not to forget about the medicine and asked if she had warned the military. And observing the very pleasant expression on Mrs. Ace's face, she nevertheless asked her to contact her comrades. After this, the girl and her sister went out, and after a while, Nanny heard a familiar voice coming from the window. Arriving at the house by car, Bello Ray greeted Miss Clara and Miss Ace. The girl angrily asked if it was because of him that her sister was sick now and shouted if he wanted her to teach him a lesson. Ace whispered to the lady not to look at the nasty things because her eyesight might be damaged. But Clara excitedly shouted at Ace not to stop her, and today she would shed someone's blood. Clara continued to be indignant and scold the uncle for apologizing guiltily, and Ace asked the lady to control herself. When Ray came to Nani, she asked what he was counting on by daring to come here, and the guy replied that he had received permission to enter. Nanny replied that he did not remember that he, the mistress, had permitted something like that, to which he replied that the head of the house was Madame Clara. Clutching the pillow in her hand, Nanny thought that today he was not talking about her sister, as he had before. Ray said he was pretty smart too, and Nanny said he should have taken care of it earlier. The guy admitted that he really should have noticed it earlier, and Nanny asked why he came. Ray asked in surprise if she was going to kick him out, and she replied that if the head of her house allowed him to enter, she had no right to kick him out. The guy said with a smile that looking at Mrs. Clara, he could guess a little what she was like as a child. And he asked if she was a cutie. Without answering, Nanny asked again why he came here. Who knows, Ray replied. If he said that he had come to visit a sick subordinate whom he loved and cared for, she would not believe him. Finding out that he was saying that he loved her, Nanny finally turned around when Ray asked if it seemed pathetic. She was glad he understood this, but asked if he had cried, and Ray replied that he had just been up all night. Ray admitted that he came to apologize. General Flancy tried to use her to control him. He said that he had been embezzling funds from the army for a long time and had regular contact with imperial smugglers. In addition, he tried to frame her and the Special Forces soldiers by falsifying evidence against them. Under normal circumstances, she would have been promoted to major and temporarily transferred to the military's logical headquarters. If she had fallen into the hands of the general, it would have been difficult for him to intervene, especially if we were talking about treason. After listening to the explanation, the girl got out of bed and asked if that was why he had prevented her promotion. Ray replied guiltily that the reason was something like this, and he also wanted to lower it. So he took the sword on purpose, Nanny asked, and Ray replied that she was strangely obsessed with that sword. After listening to these impudent speeches, the girl made a distracting maneuver by throwing the blanket up. And the next moment, jumping to her feet, she kicked Ray in the chest, pushing him into the wall, and exhaled heavily. After that, Ray asked if she felt any better, and Nanny replied irritably that she had only calmed down a quarter. This pleased Ray. He looked out the window and asked if he knew that he was the adopted son of Marquis Oceanus. The girl answered positively, and then Ray told her that as a child, he lived on the street, and if the Marquis had not found him, he would have died. His biological father abandoned him and his mother also died soon after, he said with a smile. Watching the girl's expression, he smiled and explained that since then he was afraid to get close to anyone. The story was rather boring, but that was the end of his explanations, and now Nanny could leave him. Nanny hit Ray in the chest and called him a scoundrel and asked if he thought it was an attempt to elicit pity, to which Ray laughingly asked if she fell for it, and Nanny irritably replied that he really was a real scumbag. He asked her if she knew that he was happy when she was angry with him, and the girl asked if it was because he was a pervert. Ray Oceanus did not deny it and hugged Nanny. Hugging him in response, said that nothing could be done. Hugging and clinging to Ray, she asked who else but her could take care of a fool like him. And the guy sweetly replied that if she was scolding him, it meant she was worried about him. He was happy to see how she reacted to his every action and said how sweet she was. Calling him a real pervert, Nanny looked up at Ray and asked if he loved her. Placing his hand on Nanny's neck, Ray tenderly replied that from the very moment he first saw her, he loved her and would always love her. The problem was that today was probably Nanny's last chance to leave him. But even in spite of all this, she hugged Ray around the neck and sealed their feelings with a kiss, because it was already too late. The next day, her subordinates bombarded her with questions about whether she was really dating this psycho. When asked why she decided to ruin her life so easily, she simply brushed off the answer. The girl was already tired of such attention and looked around restlessly, moving away from the crowd of people, but then Ami found her. Smiling, she noticed that the lieutenant general was not there yesterday morning, and the girl asked if he had gone to visit her. And without hearing an answer from her friend, Ami realized that she had guessed correctly, so she told her friends that she had won and demanded their money for the bet. Nanny asked how the case of the ship's theft was progressing, and Ami replied that Admiral Adbello had ordered that the trial not be held until he arrived. For the criminals, this situation was worse than death, but then she asked what about the knights. The girl didn't know this for sure, since they belonged to the royal order and would be sent to the capital under guard. They were forced to become accomplices because of threats, and since they provided information to the chief of staff, there was a chance for a lighter sentence. After hearing this, Nanny thought that Ray would most likely secretly interfere in this and how careless he was. But then Ami suggested dropping the work and asked Nanny to tell her everything, whether she had made peace with the lieutenant general. The girl reminded that she was her best friend, and Nanny asked if friends profited from information about each other. And having given in, Nanny sheepishly said that they had made peace, and Kittia laughingly said that she would earn money again. Everything was supposed to be extended again, Ray found out from a telephone conversation, and reported that the military leader had been detained. However, the person on the other end of the line continued to shout, to which Ray said that everything would be done. Coming out of the office, the lieutenant said that he was still as healthy and picky as before. The admiral seemed to be in good order and was definitely riding on a ship, but even so, he managed to criticize any noise. Following the general, the boy asked if he would allow the traitors to live, saying that the admiral was very suspicious. Ray replied that the criminals had already been detained and the plan had been prevented in advance. Now all that remained was to find out the true motive. But it seemed that this would not be the end of it. One of the admiral's fleets was involved in this matter. And also 2 from the Royal Knightly Order, so Ray wondered why them. He responded to his assistant's lack of understanding by asking how it was that the military and the Knightly Order had united. The guy asked if he thought there were more accomplices and what he was going to do now. And to the young man's surprise, General Ray, beaming with happiness, announced that he would first begin preparing for the wedding. While alone with her friend, Ami asked Nanny if they were going to get married now. She had already heard that the lieutenant general was sincere when he proposed to her, and since they had made peace, they could have a wedding. However, Nanny replied that she had been so angry these days that she had completely forgotten about it. Ami covered her face with her hand. Ami wondered if she would just forgive him everything and marry him, and then she remembered the time when she was a cadet. Then she asked Nanny what she would like to do besides serving in the army, and she answered, "Get married." The girls intriguedly attacked her with questions about whether she had someone in mind and who she wanted to marry. Then she would answer that there was nothing special there, and she just wanted to marry the one her parents had chosen. Even if it is awkward at first, they will gradually get to know and understand each other, and then create a strong family. Ami laughed at her dream of a marriage of convenience and Nanny's ruin by her noble grandmother. So now I didn't even know whether to call her conservative or just a lover of traditions. Then Ami asked if since she was getting married, she would quit her job, but Nani asked why she needed that. She explained that even after getting married, she would continue to live her life and laughing. Ami said that she was for this marriage. The general didn't have any serious flaws and he certainly had a problematic character, but she could probably handle him. Ami asked what Clara and Ace were saying, and her friend answered that the general would deal with them himself. Ray wrinkled his nose and the colonel asked what happened, to which the guy replied that it seemed like someone was scolding him right now. Dan thought there were too many redneck candidates and Ray agreed with him, but then they started talking about the incident. The title, "The Incident with the Betrayal of the General's Fleet," was a good one. The media really wanted to come up with a scandalous headline. And it seemed that everything was completed successfully thanks to the personal intervention of the lieutenant general. Ray told the colonel that there was no one better to resolve the conflict than the Oceanus family. He asked if the investigation into the Delight family was complete, and Ice replied that his wife had been questioned, but no suspects had been identified. She had long been suspicious of her husband, so she actively assisted in the investigation and provided evidence. He also heard that she had moved in with her son, and saying he was sorry, Ray thought they were victims of this incident. After this, Ray came to Nanny and the girl offered the general tea, which he did not refuse, and the girl was glad that everything was finally over. Ray said the only thing was that the poor victims had to endure journalists all morning. Nanny served tea. She said that the unfortunate man's face ended up on the front page, and the Navy's statement, unfortunately, was pushed to the back page. Ray replied that it wasn't that bad, because thanks to this, the price of the newspaper had skyrocketed tenfold. Nanny reported that Chichia had bribed the newspaper in advance and was already making huge profits, and Ray praised her forecasts. Nanny replied that she should be arrested as a financial fraudster and sipped her tea. But seeing Ray's gaze on herself, she asked if he wanted to say anything. The guy said that he just liked being around her. Nanny asked him to stop talking nonsense and asked him to give her a cup when she drank everything. Ray said that he would do everything himself, but Nanny replied that she had already started washing the dishes anyway. It seemed like he wanted to say something, but for some reason he hesitated. He kept looking at her in such a way that she couldn't stop thinking about the kiss. So Nanny, turning away in embarrassment, asked Ray to stop looking at her like that, and the guy offered to wipe her hand. He explained that these were the hands of the captain who worked so hard, but she replied that this was natural, after all, she was in the army. Suddenly, he asked when she got the scar on her ring finger, and Nanny replied that she got it when she was still a cadet. After asking if it hurt and receiving the answer that it didn't really, Ray pressed his lips to his bride's ring finger. Nanny blushed and said that the wound had hurt before, and Ray thoughtfully said that he didn't deserve it. He had a lot to tell her, but he couldn't decide, and Nanny assumed that the problem was in the place. Kneeling down in front of her and holding her hand, Ray said that he could no longer escape from this. She is well acquainted with his character, and he will definitely upset her again or make her worry, like last time. But he didn't want to see tears in her eyes anymore, and he would do everything possible to become worthy of her. He didn't have the ring with him, and the place was so-so, and Nanny agreed that it couldn't get any worse. But still, even though he was such a pathetic person, now standing on his knee, he asked her if she would marry him. Nanny only wanted to ask one thing, and she asked why he couldn't wait until the weekend. So she knew, Ray asked in horror, and Nanny asked what? That he had booked an expensive restaurant? Yes, she also had an informant. Ray said that he was just very happy, and at that moment when he drank tea with her, he was so happy that he could barely hold back tears. And then he realized that even the last seconds of his life he would remember this moment. She made his life so bright. So to say that he loves her is just banal, because she is the reason for his existence. After confessing, he asked if he looked pathetic again, but Nanny said he didn't. And after that, pulling her hand away from his, Nanny sat down on one knee and turning to Ray Oceanus said that she was ready to give an answer. She placed his wrist to her lips and Ray's cheeks flushed, but he suddenly closed his eyes in pain. Looking at Ray's hand, he realized that she had bitten him, and Nanny proudly announced that she had just made them a pair of rings. And then she suggested getting rid of the accumulated grievances, and Ray guiltily said that he liked these feelings. Well, what could she do? She was a fool herself for falling in love, but he said that he would make sure that she became the happiest fool in the world. While Ray was helping her up, the girl asked in surprise if this was possible, and said that if he considered her a fool, she would kill him. Walking through the corridors, the general's assistant came across 3 people and asked what they were all doing there. Looking at him, the cherry-haired girl quietly said that the lieutenant general and the captain entered this room together. He said it was impolite to eavesdrop on other people's conversations, and Ami explained that they had been there for more than 10 minutes. They assumed that they knew that someone would be eavesdropping behind the door, and Ami, guided by the silence, assumed that they were currently in the process of kissing. The girl, admitting this, asked if the general would decide to do such a thing, but how could Captain Nanny allow such a thing? Ami suggested a bet and bet that they would kiss. The girl asked if she thought she had become addicted to betting. But after taking her money, Ami and the others were already congratulating Captain Nanny on his wedding. Seeing her friend's depressed state, Nanny asked Ami what happened, but she said that everything was fine and congratulated her friend. Feeling encouraged, she said she hoped that her small sacrifice would be a step towards her happiness. Ray informed his subordinates that their honeymoon would last a week and asked them to keep this in mind, but the guys were already ready to give themselves entirely to the great cause, and then bombarded Ray with wedding questions. After talking with everyone, the general told the bride that he knew that most people already knew everything. And then he said that he contacted Admiral Adbello, and this old woman was sometimes angry, sometimes laughing, and he couldn't understand what was wrong with her. Ever since she started insisting on a viewing for her granddaughter, she had made a lot of noise. But in the end, she congratulated him. Ray said that he already had enough Adbello types in his life, in the form of that old woman and that magic tower. He didn't need any others. And she is enough for him, so he no longer needs other women. For such sweet words, he could be forgiven for everything. But then Nanny asked if he would do everything properly during dinner, and Ray replied guiltily that he just needed to get himself in the right frame of mind. When greeting the guests, Clara shouted that there was an enemy here, a bastard who made her sister cry, and told him to get lost. Ray guiltily said that he was also glad to meet Miss Clara, and Nanny asked her sister why she was in her pajamas, asking the lady to wait, as asked with displeasure why she was greeting such an inconspicuous guest in this precious place with such indifference. Clara told him to leave, and Ray, almost in tears, asked what to do, to which Nanny replied that he needed to behave well. And when Ace asked if he could wait a little in the restaurant, informing him that the food would be ready soon, Ray was ready to cry. Clara screamed that she would not feed him, and Ace, asking the lady to calm down, said that they should at least give the guest salt water. But the girl said that she was even sorry about the salt, because it was bought with the money that she, her sister, and Ace had worked so hard to earn. Ace was glad that their mistress always said beautiful words, but Ray himself did not understand whether he would survive today. And then Nanny said that she would change her clothes and return in 2 hours. Ray realized that she enjoyed watching him suffer. At the table, Clara told her uncle that she knew it was he who made her sister sad. And Ray guiltily explained to the little girl that these were simply adult problems that arose due to a misunderstanding. And Clara replied that if he can't explain it to the child normally, it means that he has done something really bad. Ray wanted to justify himself, but then Clara declared that she was against him marrying her sister. After listening to the little girl and accepting her decision, Oceanus did not give up and apologized to Miss Clara. The girl said that her grandmother always said that her sister trusted appearance too much and would one day run into a bad man. Ray said he wouldn't be a bad man anymore, and Clara said she didn't give him permission to talk, and then Nanny came in. She asked her sister when she planned to change or if she was going to stay in these clothes. Pouting, she replied that she didn't want to marry this man, so she wasn't going to dress up nicely. But then Ray, having rummaged under the table, said that he had a gift for Miss Clara and put the box on the table. As it turned out, the gift was a limited edition Spike rabbit, and Nanny asked her sister to breathe. It was a rabbit with a knife from the third film, The Outlaw Butcher, Killed with the Stars. The sister didn't even have an idea what it was about. Clara said that this collection was only released in 10 copies, and Nanny asked Ray how she got it. As soon as Az came to the dining room and said that the food was ready, Clara told her sister that she wanted to change her clothes. And before leaving the room, Clara turned around and looked at Ray and said that this did not mean that she forgave him. The girl ran away happily, and Nanny was amazed that he knew how to handle children, but he said that he couldn't have done it without her help. After Ray asked if Ace had prepared everything herself, the girl replied that the knives had cut especially well today. Clara wished everyone a pleasant appetite and thanked them for the food, but Ray suddenly became thoughtful. Does he deserve to feel this warmth? Can he be part of this close-knit family, and can he become a member of it? He was so touched that he began to lose confidence, but then Clara turned to the uncle and said that she had a question. My sister said that the Navy had sealed a huge sea monster and asked if it was true. Playing along with Nanny, Ray turned to Captain Bello and asked her if she had revealed an important secret. The girl apologized to the general. The lieutenant general reminded that the sea monster caught by the fleet is a secret that cannot be disclosed. Ace asked if this meant that the legendary monster Guragura really existed, and Ray confirmed it. This is a terrible monster that takes children if they lie, asked Ace, looking at the younger lady. Looking at the little girl, Ray asked her not to worry, saying that the fleet was protecting him and Miss Clara was safe because she was a good girl and didn't lie. But then Clara looked away from the adults and admitted that she had lied a little about her sister's lipstick. Earlier, she said that she didn't know where she had disappeared to, but in fact she, Lily, and Sophia, then Nanny, shouted at her. After dinner, Ray thanked Ace for the food, and she, replying that she was glad he liked it, suggested continuing the conversation. Or, more accurately, it was an interrogation. Clara asked if he came here because he wanted to marry his sister. Ray confirmed to the family that this was true and that she loved Nanny. Clara whispered to Ace what she should say. After consulting with Az, Clara said that she first needed to make sure that he was right for her sister. She asked about his name, she gave him his full name, about his job, he gave his profession and headquarters, but then Clara asked if he had any savings. Now Ray realized that this was her real question, this moment more intense than any battle he had experienced. One wrong word and all is lost, that's right. Now he's fighting with this seemingly innocent woman. But after Nani's words about Az, he prepared himself and said that the evidence would speak louder than words. So he took out of his jacket a pre-prepared payroll, a list of assets and tax documents. After examining the documents, Ace exclaimed in surprise at the numbers, and Clara mumbled that it was impressive, not understanding anything. And then she asked as if she liked their future son-in-law, but the girl, stunned, replied that that was not the issue. And at that very moment she took Ray by the hands and asked the young master to take care of the lady, and he called her sister-in-law. Nanny was even a little confused, since everything happened so quickly, but if everything ended well, it's for the best. And then Ace suggested that Ray look at some more rooms while he was here, but Nanny screamed that it was too fast. While at the meeting, Nani looked at her fiancé at the head of the table in fascination. Her friend Amy noticed this and sarcastically said that the gases would fall out and asked if she was now trying to hide it. Nanny told her to shut up. The discussion decided that Dan would contact the other side and Ray ended the meeting for today. Ami told her friend that today at dawn people saw one of the convoys stop at a black building. Rumor has it that a torture chamber was born in that zone and a girl with cherry-colored hair approached them and asked what kind of torture they used in their time. Ami smiled and said that she was still just a child because torture was prohibited by law, so it was done secretly in such places. And indeed, Nanny reasoned, the criminals in the case of military treason are no longer in prison, and therefore they have been transferred to another place. Ami exclaimed that this was what she was talking about, and Nanny said that there was no point in guessing, because it would not lead to anything good. Lieutenant Chitia pouted and said that she had just been on her side, and her friend asked if she was a child. Ami asked what she was going to do on the weekend, and if she was going to prepare for the wedding, she would help her. Nani needed to throw out the old furniture and clean the room. The third girl asked if she had already found a house for the newlyweds. But Nanny explained that she did not plan to live separately. They had a spare room, so the general would move in with them. She will give him the room of her brother, who ran away from home, and Ami noticed that she does not seem to acknowledge his existence at all. Cherry Girl hissed at the idea of them living together until marriage and said she thought Nanny was more conservative. In fact, Nanny didn't think that it would happen this way, but Ray himself expressed a desire to live with them until the wedding. Everyone was happy with this proposal, and the friends noticed that Ace was a real leader in their house. While taking the furniture out of the house, Ace said that throwing away furniture was also an expense, and Ray asked if maybe they should have kept it for themselves. But Ace didn't agree, and said that a new family means new furniture, and Ray asked her to tell him that if he needed anything, he would order everything. Nanny was finishing up her dusting job when Ray came up to her and said that they were done. Now that everything was cleared away, it was quite spacious, and Nanny asked if it was cramped compared to his old room. But the guy looked at the bride, smiled, and said that all the rooms in which people live are essentially the same. Then Clara came up to them and, looking around, said that everything looked better than she expected. But she was already hungry, and Ace suggested that they go somewhere to have dinner, and Ray invited everyone to go by car. During the meal, Ace asked when they planned to get married. Clara wanted it to happen quickly, and the guy shared her views. But in any case, they needed to pick a date, Nanny said, and get it sorted out quickly. It was already the middle of the month, and they needed to book a hall, as well as sew a dress, which would take several months. Even if she hurried, it would only work out in the fall, and Nanny thought that she should first apply for marriage. Clara asked the rabbit if everything was so complicated, and suddenly asked the uncle if he was a nobleman. And when Ray confirmed this, Clara said that everything could be solved with money. Nanny wanted to scold her sister, but then Ray enthusiastically said that this was really a topic. How come he hadn't thought about it before? The girl worriedly reminded the groom that he usually wasn't even happy about being a nobleman. And Ray said, smiling, that he wanted to take advantage of the privileges for the first and last time. 1 or 2 calls and everything would be sorted out. When Ray walked away, Clara said that it was incredible. Just recently her sister had fought so hard with him. But Ace assured the lady that couples quarrel and make up, and that is how their relationship becomes stronger. Clara found it hard to believe this, and she didn't want to see her sister cry. Ace encouraged her by saying that if this happened, they would scold the young master. The elder lady taught them an important lesson: to act, to strike before he had time to say anything. Nanny said that they would not quarrel in front of the child, and then Ace asked who the young gentleman had gone to call. If he was going to take advantage of his noble status, he probably called Marquis Oceanus or someone in his circle, Nanny replied. Ace carefully asked if he knew yet, and Nanny proudly declared that it was a secret for now. The girl laughed. And then she asked the lady when she was going to arrange a meeting with her parents. Nanny shuddered. She sighed in surprise, and Ace, horrified, asked if she had even thought about it. Nanny guiltily admitted that she had forgotten. Upon learning of what had happened, Ami said, as expected, that she and the lieutenant general were rare idiots. She could already hear Ace burning with anger and asked if she had contacted her parents. Nanny called them yesterday. Mom sarcastically remarked that she called just in time, and Dad burst into tears. Ami then asked about the general, whether he had contacted Marquis Oceanus, but then Ray told everyone to stop chatting. When everyone was lined up, Ray said that an assault warning had just been issued. This is the perfect time for training. They are naval officers and they must not let the waves break them. After the storm training, everyone sat on the deck in horror, coming to their senses, almost dying. Ray said with a smile that the waves were really strong today, and Dan said that the wind would continue to rage for some time. Spring in the South was always like this, and suddenly the colonel asked how the wedding preparations were going. Ray asked the lieutenant major if he had had a similar experience, and Ice noted that he spoke as if he was divorced. Ray asked if he had told his parents when they got married, and Dan replied that of course, but after the visit his father-in-law almost killed him. And then Ray, laughing guiltily, said that he and Nanny had forgotten to call them, so he wanted to ask for advice. Dan told the lieutenant general that it was imperative to contact both families, even if he was an adopted son. He asked why he hadn't contacted his family yet, and Ray said guiltily that the situation wasn't the easiest. But as far as he knew, Marquis Oceanus had never treated him unfairly because he was an adopted son. But in any case, they will soon find out, said Ray. All his actions, one way or another, reached them. The driver informed the Marquis that they had arrived, and the lady asked him to wait until she returned. It was not worth lingering in front of the presented building, and then Marquis Oceanus was asked what brought her here. The man asked if this was related to the general, and the Marquis realized that the general was indeed here. Today he was here with the head of the department. Today he was at the scene of the arrest, and laughter was coming from the office. Walking into the room, the Marquis assumed that the chief had suffered a lot because of the general. The general said he was too weak-willed, and the Marquis said that everyone became like that in front of him. The lady said she heard he was present at the scene of the arrest, along with the National Security Directorate. He pouted and replied that he had just come to watch, and the lady asked who was just watching and kicking the suspect. Grandfather, like a capricious child, said that he had put his foot out, and he had run into him himself. The Marquis sighed heavily. The Marquis called her father to talk, saying that Ray had called her and asked why he had gone to the place of his arrest. It was an abuse of power, but Ray said he had set up a decoy, so he went to take a look. As if he couldn't handle it himself, she noted, Ray had asked for a leniency of sentence for the two knights involved in the matter. They were blackmailed into committing the crime and surrendered before it was committed, so they were given only light sentences. It was a temporary suspension, but in his petition, Ray indicated that there was a real ringleader among them. The one they arrested today is the real main culprit. Neither the general nor Sir Delight had any connections to the Empire. When her father asked why this boy, Ray, was calling her, the girl noticed that this boy was already so old. For the grandfather, all grandchildren remained children, and then the Marchioness said that he contacted her to ask to use his personal capital. Personal capital? The lieutenant asked. He knew he didn't just spend money, so what happened? And the Marquis dared to suggest that he was going to get married upon hearing this. The man asked in surprise what this meant. The wedding was in half a month. Everything was arranged easily. The dress was also ready, and the place was booked. It was too simple to feel like it was a real wedding. But Ray asked the bride, if she said so, what should he think then? As she wrote down, it looked like all that was left was to take wedding photos and meet the parents. Pressing his hand against Nanny's, Ray sighed and announced in advance that there would be no bachelor or bachelorette party. After all, they had long since become each other's first. Nanny blushed and loudly asked if he had gone crazy. She kicked him in the face, and Ace said that if it hadn't been for that, it would have been stranger, and he should try to restrain himself in front of the mistress. But then Clara ran into the room worriedly and calling her sister and Ace, shouting that Mom and Dad had arrived.